Welcome back to the EJ Ward Field View training series. In this video, we're going to go over how to add a Ward 4 FCT or fuel control terminal. To do this, we need to start out by going to the site management folder. On the left-hand side, I'm just going to click the folder here, and then I'm going to go to terminals. From here, to add a new terminal, we're going to click on the add record. Now, in our Field View system, we have three different types of terminals that we're currently using, and that's our Ward 3 FCT, our Ward 4 FCT, and our IoT terminal. So for this one, we're going to have the terminal type set to Ward 4 FCT. This is going to change the amount of data that we need below. So each time we change, if you see here, we can go to Ward 4 IoT, and it's going to change the amount of information that we need to put in to add this record. So we're going to go back to Ward 4 FCT. So we need a terminal number, and that terminal number needs to be unique within the system. So we're going to go ahead and put in terminal number 285. The terminal code can be whatever you would like it to be. It's just a different identifier on what this terminal is. We need to click the site and put the site that this terminal is on. So we're going to go ahead and put it in our test site 1. Firmware version and boot ROM version are going to automatically fill out once the terminal connects. These are the versions of the software that is loaded onto that terminal, and they'll automatically generate whenever we start talking to that terminal. Same thing goes with last communication. It's going to give us a last communication whenever we start talking to the terminal. We have two checkboxes in the profile section. The first one is online, and the second one is active. Active means it's currently active inside of the system. Online means that terminal is online and people can fuel at it. If you don't want people to fuel at the system because it might not be there yet, or there might be some work going on with it, you can uncheck that online and save it, and it's not going to be able to do any transactions. Whenever somebody tries to do a transaction on it, it's going to tell them that the terminal is offline. To bring it back online, all you have to do is check that online checkbox. We have our terminal type after that, which we've already selected, and then the date deactivated, which will fill out if we deactivate that terminal from the system. For the Ward 4 terminal, under communications, we have a host name or an IP address. So you're going to want to put your IP address in here. Once that's done, you're going to want to select Use TCP/IP Socket. That basically means that it's using an IP address. Call during polling. So we have automatic pollings that go. Typically with our Ward 4s, we do them once a day. So it'll be probably at midnight or sometime when nobody's fueling. You want to go ahead and check this if you want this to go into the polling. What the polling does is it makes sure that the database on that terminal is exactly the way it is on our fueling system. So let's say you've added 10 people or 10 vehicles inside of the system or changed up the records some. Unless that person goes to try to fuel with those records, they try to fuel with that employee card or that vehicle, it's not going to add it to our terminals. So we automatically have a polling cycle that goes through that adds everything to that system, so that particular terminal. Truck terminals are usually the only ones that we don't have calling during polling, because our customers poll those manually because they're parked at the actual site at random times and we can't always communicate with them. We have a controller number. A controller number is if you want to group up the terminals. So let's say you have a section of terminals that are inside of Texas and a section of terminals that are inside of Oklahoma, and you want to call them at different times. You can set up a controller number group and have controller number 1 for all the ones that are in Texas and controller number 2 that are all the ones inside of Oklahoma. And through your polling program, you'll have to get with EJ Ward, and an EJ Ward technician will help you out segregating those so that they can be called at different times. The poll attempts we leave blank, and then we have our timings below that. So the call-in interval is how many times it's going to call in if it fails, so it'll call it in, try to call it in again. We have our polling interval, which is set for a day, and most of this is set up inside of the Windows task scheduler, so we don't need to touch any of this. And then below we have our limits, our timeouts, and our prompts. For this, we have an enable timeout, interpulse timeout. These two kind of work together. So the enable timeout is from the time the terminal says pump, whatever pump number they're at is ready, begin fueling, to when they actually start pumping fuel. There's a timeout in between that. So for default, we put it at 60 seconds. So whenever somebody activates that pump, they have 60 seconds to go over and actually start fueling on their vehicle. You can change this to whatever you would like to, but we recommend 60 seconds. The interpulse timeout comes when you're already fueling. So the way we track fuel is by what's called pulses. And every pulse, typically most of our pulsers are every 10 pulses equal a gallon. So if they stop fueling and pulses stop coming in, it's going to go through this timeout, which is the interpulse timeout. If either of these timeouts hit 0, and either on the enable timeout they haven't even started fueling, or they don't start fueling again with the interpulse timeout, it's going to shut off that transaction, and they're going to have to redo that entire transaction again. So these timeouts are really up to the customer. We recommend to at least start at 60. If you need to make it longer, you can, but typically 60 is kind of the lowest you want to go. Below that, we have our decay timeout. The decay timeout, we want to keep at 5, and that's just the default that we use, and there's no reason why you'd need to change that. We have our shutdown limit on the top right-hand side. This is how many transactions the terminal can hold before it shuts off. We keep this at 950 because we don't want to have too many transactions in there that haven't been sent to the system itself. And 950 is typically what we can do with our Ward 4 terminals. You can go above a little bit or below a little bit, but if you hit that number, it will start telling you the buffer is full. So when someone tries to fuel, it's going to say buffer is full, and it's going to not let them do a transaction. This is typically a sign that there is no network communication between the terminal itself and the server, so it's not able to send its transactions. Because with a Ward 4 terminal, it sends its transactions as soon as that transaction is done, it puts it into the server. So if it's not able to do that for 950 transactions, which was more than likely going to be quite a bit of time, we need to actually get an EJ Ward technician out there or call tech support so we can figure out what's going on with that terminal in the network. Our gallon limits, we keep it at 0 because there's a gallon limit on our terminals, but we have a gallon limit on every vehicle. We recommend setting it by the vehicle, but we do have it here if you want to set it per transaction for this terminal. And then we have a keypad entry type. The keypad entry type is going to be put in by the EJ Ward technician. This depends on what you have to use the keypad for and what you use to types of information you punch into the keypad. Below that, we have some checkboxes. So we have our CanSiever EE prompt. If you are using Ward 4 CanSievers or Ward 3 CanSievers with a template that is higher than 1, you want to have this checked. We have our Survive CanSiever signal loss. What this means is you have your CanSiever and the filler neck or your dispenser is plugged into the filler neck of the vehicle and you're fueling. So let's say you want to take it out and put it into a saddle tank or something like that. You can do that. You need to have Survive CanSiever signal loss checked. What this means is if you actually disconnect the hose module from the CanSiever itself on the vehicle, so you take the dispenser and pull it out of the filler neck, it's going to cut the transaction immediately. If you have Survive CanSiever signal loss checked, it's going to go off of your enable timeout and your interpulse timeout. We have allowed outside fueling. This is something that you only want to check if instructed by your implementation specialist or an EJ Ward technician. This is for having outside entities be able to fuel inside of your system. And the same goes with auxiliary authorization. This is if you have a mainframe or another system that's doing all the authorization and our system's just sending it to it. Intelligent backup we put to 0 because our system backs up by itself already, so we don't need to put that. And then strict odometer is something that we can set up on the vehicles itself. It's kind of like the gallon limit. The strict odometer, you just want to keep the strict odometer unchecked because we're going to set that up per vehicle. Below that, we have the TLS information. We're going to be going over the TLS information in another video. There's 2 ways that we can add a TLS to the system, and one of them is through the terminals page. And then at the bottom, we have terminal software, and this is only for Ward 3 FCTs. And the Ward 3 FCTs have certain terminal software that they can send to it. With the Ward 4 terminals, that software is manually loaded by an EJ Ward technician or an implementation specialist. Once we're done setting up all of this information, we're going to go ahead and click on Save. Once that's saved, I can go ahead and search my terminal number, so it's 245. And now I have my test site terminal here. If I want to change anything about this terminal, let's say you're changing the network and you need to change the IP address, you just click on the terminal number itself. Make sure that you're clicking on the terminal number and not the site name, because the site name will bring up the site record. So we're clicking on the terminal number, and then I can change my IP address, and let's say it's 60 now. And then I can go ahead and save it and change that record. Once you change this record on any of this information, it's going to automatically call that terminal and start sending the information to that terminal. It does it in the background, and it will be able to show you, if we go back to the main screen, down here at the bottom, we have a small little section that will show you that it's calling that terminal and if it's successful or not. I don't have this terminal is not a physical terminal I have set up, so it's going to fail because it's not able to communicate to anything. And once we're done with that, that terminal is inside of our system and it's ready to be set up and working on the physical site. That concludes the video on adding and changing a Ward 4 FCT. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.